Want de moderatoren gewoon niet, en ik kan echt niet iets zeggen, ik vind dat jullie er beter in lijken. Ja.
Dus ja, goedenavond allemaal, welkom.
English, in English, yeah.
Ah yes, good evening everybody, welcome. Thank you very much, Danielle and Kunstal. We've been working here the past couple of days on Eavatea, mapping tool that we have been working on for the last almost 2 years, I would say, with a specific goal to be able to archive, publish, and reactivate a series of nomadic ephemeral practices, research-based practices. And we put ourselves a challenge in the sense that we said on Thursday evening, we will make a first public presentation of this tool. It's a prototype, first and foremost, and we have the opportunity during the coming year until the summer of next year to work more on what this tool can become or be in terms of an artistic experiment, but also in terms of the question it raises in the sense of how to make it sustainable in the long term. So how will we govern it? Who has access? How can we finance this? But I think in this first stage, we need to make it operational. And that's why we thought, let's give ourselves a little bit of a deadline pressure to make sure that we have something we can present for an audience to see what is possible at this stage. I think
Nadine is going to introduce the live streaming, maybe?
Yes.
Yeah.
The occasion is live conversation organized by Nadine in Brussels. Maybe Loes.
Hello, everyone. I'm Loes. I work for a Brussels-based organization that's called Nadine, and we support artistic practices that are very much affiliated with public space and work in our society, and that kind of go into different disciplines. And I've proposed this format of conversation for tonight to the group. This is a format that that came about in 2021 during the COVID period. And as Nadine, we bring always a lot of artists together around the table to talk about subjects, but at that moment it was difficult. So we brought then 4 groups together, small groups, to talk about different themes, and we live streamed them. So that was our public, our way to make this public. And these conversations then were transcribed and were part of the publication. And so this is our first live conversation that is live streamed, but also with an audience. So I'm very happy that you are all here to join us and also to talk about this amazing platform. Voilà.
And maybe also it's good to say first who we are and why we have this odd team together, because we have an organization, Nadine, and there is Jubilee, and there is Atelier Cartographique. So we have started from the very beginning, from the ground up, to build this digital platform ourselves, so in a dialogue. So I think that's kind of special. Like, it's not a design that was already there or that was proposed and then you try to jump in, but so we had many questions and ideas, and slowly we try to move forward. That's also why it takes so much time and so much meetings and so much collaboration, because then you have totally different desires and ideas what such a platform could mean. So, and we try to take these ideas and desires along the way in the progress that we try to make with it.
So my name is Vermeir Heiremans. I'm a member of Jubilee.
I'm Vermeir, part of a duo of artists and also part of Jubilee.
So Loes from Nadine.
I'm Maximiliaan Royakkers. I'm an artist and an architect, member of Jubilee, and one of the artists that started to work on this platform.
Hello, I'm Julie. I work at Atelier Cartographique. So we are a cooperative based in Brussels, and we are, I don't know, like I would say, we worked on the development and design of the platform, but together with all of you. So yeah, but the technical side more. Yeah.
You have the technical knowledge. I'm Ciel Grommen, also architect background, but I have an artistic practice. And maybe to jump a bit to the content, like why did we participate in this endeavor? It's because I collaborated together with Max and Clémentine on a practice called Atlas of Ovens, and it was actually based on the fact that Max and I had realized a stove, like a sculpture in public space. And while preparing for that sculpture, we collected a lot of imagery and drawings about stoves in general. And we found out that while we were building this platform, Clémentine Vautier also did the same. Like she had a kind of similar archive, and we teamed up to actually put these archives together and to continue this research to heat infrastructures, which was a vibrant research, but not so easy to document. And therefore, we thought that joining this endeavor and for creating a mapping platform on which we could publish this research, the Atlas of Ovens, that this could be helpful. So.
For us, it was a bit the same. Kathleen and myself, we the last years have what you could say a walking practice. So we do a lot of walks in which they all start from a, let's say, a documentary exhibition with historical documents, archival material, which we activate during those walks in a direct conversation with an audience, with a public that is interested in certain questions. The walks focus on property relations in water as a natural commons. And we had the idea that we wanted to learn how water is governed in order to understand better how we could govern our social commons, which is art. Turned out to be a bit problematic how water is governed. So this became a really focus in what we're doing. And since all of these walks had many stories that were actually coming up during those walks, because walking is really an amazing practice. It creates a horizontality between people. You share stories, you start thinking about things, because we try to bring these historical moments, these questions from before, they're still with us. We try to bring into the contemporary. And that's why we thought, okay, maybe how can we actually keep these together, keep these alive, do the walks again, etc., etc. And that's when, to a certain extent, a mapping tool came into the on the horizon, but it was way too big for us. So we started looking for partners, people that were also interested in these possible solutions. And I'm sure that we each have our own needs and desires in relation to the tool, and that's what we will be talking about tonight. But maybe first,
do you want to say why you joined?
Maybe just quickly that as Nadine supports practices that affiliate a lot with public space and happen or have an outcome in very different disciplines and different materials, we were, as an organization, interested how we could support them, how we could communicate about them, how we can publish them. And we had worked already in the past with Atelier Cartographique. So it was a very nice question that we got from you to join this endeavor. And we thought we could bring also the point of view of an organization and a supporting structure to the table. Voila. And then our needs be transformed during this whole process. But we'll talk about that later.
We thought to start maybe to give you a brief overview of how the platform works at this moment. Honey already said that it's a working prototype, so it's something that is under development, and that we're over the next year and a half we're gonna continue to develop. But at the moment we have a working prototype, and we thought it would be a good idea just to have a brief introduction on very concretely how does the platform work, what is it composed of. So I'm going to try to explain this while navigating through it with you. This is the landing page where you see a series of fragments. We call them shards on the left. And all of these fragments, they represent gestures. We call them gestures, but you could also call them projects of different practices. And in the first, maybe a first thing that is important, that in the first go, you don't see whose gesture belongs to which practice and who is the author of what. But all of these gestures, they're shown on a grid in a kind of equal way. And on the right, there is a kind of, let's say, legend that gives a bit more information on the practices that are represented on the platform at the moment, the contributors, and an overview of the projects or gestures that are that you can see on the left in the visual, on the visual side of this page. There is, of course, a kind of introductory text that helps people that do not understand what they're looking at to have a kind of basic sense of what this platform is, how it works, and what it tries to do. Basically, this is the highest level, or like the upper scale of the platform. Each time we go to a new page, we zoom in on a specific practice and its gestures, and within a gesture, the kind of resources, documents, and places that are important for a certain project and its research. So I'm gonna try to click on this one, which is a gesture that is called From Chimney to Chimney, which is up a bike tour that Ciel, Clementine, and I organized within the practice of Atlas of Ovens. It was a bike tour that took place in the city of Ghent in the spring of 2023, in which we drove to the city of Ghent, tracing chimneys in the city and the heating infrastructure, but also looking at the history and the entanglements of the city with gas and smoke. This tour was composed of different stops, and at each stop we visited a site and talked about certain historic practices that took place in this site and connected them to certain other practices that are related to this practice. And so if you go into this the space of a gesture, you see again an overview on the left of visual information. This can be very different. In this case, it's a series of images and geolocated maps. On the right, a kind of description about the project, people that contributed, which is something that in all of our project is quite important, that people that participate as an organizer, but also as invited experts or people that bring resources to a certain artistic event or project, they are mentioned on the right, and a kind of reference to which practice this gesture relates. So this is a second level of the platform. If I kind of use one of these fragments, which in this case is an image that relates to a visit that we did in the Ham Luminous factory, which is an electricity factory. We chose to kind of invite a photographer, Michiel de Kleene, to take pictures along the route. And he documented our situated visits. But you can see on the right, there is a link, if it works. It doesn't. Where is it?
Downloading. Yeah. The only top right.
Here?
Hold on, Max, it's almost done. Yeah,
Ah. Hmm. Well, okay, we're moving around. You can see that this document is actually a PDF with traces of our visit. And then a series of archival documents about the site, links to other sites that are connected to this. For example, a waste management facility in Copenhagen in Denmark that Clémentine also visited. And so these documents are all resources that we used during our bike tour in the city of Ghent that we kind of share with an audience also so that they can look at it afterwards. How do I move?
Yes.
Yeah, I'm sorry about that. It's not my computer. Ah, Ciel, can you help me? There it is. So this, I talked about different levels. So the first level is the Eavatea level, which collects gestures of different practices. Second level is the level of a gesture, which is basically a project and that collects different documents or resources that are linked to a certain project. And then a third layer, which is a trace, which could be an image, a video, audio. It can be many things, but they're all things that are mobilized to realize a gesture. You can see on the right that there is, again, a text describing what we are looking at. Also a kind of small chart that indicates where this trace comes from, and then a kind of overview of traces that are related to this, which is something that on the platform is quite important, or something that we're trying to develop more now, is a question of collaboration or links between practices through on different levels. For example, a resource document, it might be a theoretical text, it might be a historical image, might appear in the research of two people or two entities that work on this platform, and that allows to show that documents move or travel between different researches, which is a kind of way of linking certain themes, places, and artistic gestures together. So just to give you a brief overview, this is now moving to another site within our own bike tour. Again, it's a PDF. I will not open it because then I will get into a mess. But you see that you can actually visit or move between things without necessarily always have the full navigational capacity and knowing where you're going, but a bit discovering how things and what kind of things are related. Just to close this. Something that is similar as a trace, but it is more geolocated, that I will also briefly show, is that as this is a bike tour, you can see here a map that traces this bike tour, showing different dots that indicate places that we stopped at. And basically, if I click on one of them, you move to another map, and you can see on the right the trace that is linked to this map. So in a way, it allows people that didn't participate in our bike tour to kind of reactivate, in a certain sense, the tour that we did with the resources that we had. And as such, the work can kind of continue to be activated. I don't know if I have to explain more at the beginning?
It's maybe nice to show what we have been doing here in the summer school, because we created a collective practice.
Mhm.
So maybe it's nice to show it quickly,
Yes.
because that's another level next to what we could call the vertical levels of individual or projects that you can follow from the practice to the gesture and the trace, the individual documents. But we try to make these horizontal linkages between documents, etc., but also create collective projects. For example, the summer school we are in Kunsthal right now for 1 week. So we created a new practice, which is Jubilee Summer Schools, and this summer school is part of it. And we try to upload already elements what we have been doing in this week.
So this week we were working on Commons to Co-op. That's the title of the summer school. And as an exercise, we collected documents or things that were related to the visits that we did this week and the workshops that we have been working on. For example, this afternoon we visited a garden in Moucron, which is called the Jardin de la Fraternité Ouvrière, which is a kind of commoning project that is at the same time a productive permaculture garden and a seed bank where people exchange seeds and knowledge about autosufficiency and how to, through the sharing of seeds, be less dependent of the seed and agricultural industry. Or we did a visit or a walk through the city of Ghent, through the cooperative city of Ghent, where we visited different buildings that were linked to the socialist movement. And this is a historical image of the Vooruit bakery, which was actually the start of this socialist movement through a bakery cooperative. And maybe, yes. One last thing that I didn't mention is that you see this kind of very small, subtle line below. Is something that we call a situation, which basically next to a description of what the project actually is a kind of maybe announcement about a larger framework in which this project tries to inscribe itself. It can be a question, a research topic, or a specific site, which also kind of opens up to thematic links between gestures of different practices. I hope this was a bit understandable.
We go back to the homepage.
Yeah.
I'm going.
Yes.
On the map views, you also have the navigation to other practices. I mean, on the map view of when a marker is a map, you see the different related gestures around it. No?
Yes, I can show you this. This is maybe also something that I forgot to say. If you're in this geo-referenced or geolocated map view, you can see that around each map, again, there is a kind of possibility to navigate the tool in a kind of more, how do you say this?
Local affinity.
Yeah, through local affinities. So for example, here we have the city of Ghent and the gesture that I talked about from chimney to chimney. But on the right, you see from commons to co-ops, you can actually move from map to map. Proximity. So things are moving around the map and you can travel through different gestures because they are located in proximity to one another. Yes, geographic proximity.
Maybe the little beaches around the islands.
Yes.
Then we covered all the visual things
Yes.
that we see.
I already mentioned this in the beginning that one of the reasons why we were interested in producing this platform on a collaborative basis is that we are very interested in collaboration on multiple levels, and also making visible these collaborations in a certain way. And this platform is also kind of a way of experimenting with how collaborations between artistic practices and research-based practices come together. I mentioned that on the level of documents, this can be a form of collaboration in a sense that we use similar documents. It could also be on a thematic level. It could be through participation in other people's projects or collaborative projects as such. But to represent this visually, we also experimented with ways of showing this, which is basically in this first step shown through these kind of shadows or beaches that are floating around these islands. And you see that some of these islands, they actually overlap, or these beaches, they start to kind of connect, which is a kind of visual way of trying to start to kind of make tangible a possible connection, although it's not very explicit what this connection might be. So you have to kind of dive into a certain project to understand what this connection is and on what level this actually operates.
But you can already install it in the website. When you see a double page, then you can make a connection. For example, we did a walking project with Nadine. So there you can make in the admin site already, like, okay, this is the connection, and then you will also see it and in collaboration with. So then you can see all these different beaches around the islands.
So this is not random. This is really where the different gestures overlap. What we see here.
You mean
It's a question.
the exact spot where they touch? That is a bit random, I think.
Okay.
Yeah. The idea is actually to maybe it's something that we can go into because we worked very closely with the designer team of Atelier Cartographique, and they speak a language we don't understand. And we speak a language they don't really understand. So it took a year to exchange vocabularies. And actually it was not easy, but we both intuitively had the feeling that we were hitting on something that was worthwhile further investigation. And it seems to be confirmed because we're still sitting
In the same room.
Without tearing each other's hair out. We actually wrote an article together, 10-page article, which will be published soon in a research magazine. And in that article, we go through a series of questions that we had, both in terms of content, but also in terms of methodology, in terms of collaboration, in terms of goals that we set for ourselves with this tool. And since we are all very pronounced and active and clear about what we want, it is clear that we do not all want the same thing. So the question is how to not deny yourself the opportunity for this tool to become what you want it to become, but also allow others for it to become what they want to become. So what is the communal space? And that was the search that we actually did for the last 2 years, basically. And what you see now is the provisionary outcome of that. But it's still a long way to go to make it actually in a tool that is operational to the extent that we have in mind. And that's maybe something that we can go into, how translate ideas and desires from a bunch of artists into
code.
into something that is looks like a map, but it's not really a map, of course. But we will talk about that later as well. Julie, any good ideas how we did that?
Yeah, I mean, I can talk about the process. I think also for us it was a really interesting process, and we were given the opportunity to also try out methodology, like in terms of methodology, try out things that we had wanted to try out for a long time, but somehow I think we did not. We had not yet encountered partners that would be so into also questioning visualization and questioning the hierarchies and willing to also really work together and make something together collectively, even if it means long discussions, negotiation, listening to each other's desires. And so we organized it in a way that we organized several collective work sessions. And I think so we first within Atelier Cartographique, so here I'm sitting alone, but Sophie is there in the room and there are other members as well, so we're also a smaller team. And so we started to organize thematic workshops. For example, on the first big bit was okay, you have loads of information, of archive, of material, and then how do you want to organize it? How do you want to organize it in a way that makes sense for you, each of you in duo, trio, individually, but also that makes sense for a larger audience. And so we started also trying to materialize what was a database in these cardboards with categories and so on. And I think for us was important that the discussions and so on also became concrete, and then the discussions feed into the prototype in the making, and then once we had a prototype we would come back, and then that would feed into the discussions and the more conceptual things or inspirations, and then again a loop. And so, for example, these fish, I think it allowed us to understand and start having a common language on practices, gesture, but also how they relate to each other and so on. And then came up the question of the how do we visualize all of this informational system? And then we went back to the visual references. I don't know if you want to maybe have a word on, because Max and Ciel, you brought.
There were two references continuously coming up. The first was the Tupaya map. Especially Kathleen and Ronnie dived completely into this topic, so maybe you want to speak about it. They got completely fascinated by Tupaya.
I'm just gonna open the map.
Yeah,
that's a Tupaya map.
Yeah, so that's a Tupaya map. So also the name of the platform comes from there. It's called Eavatea. So Eavatea is the sun at noon. Tupaya is a fascinating figure. He is a navigator from the 17th century. 18th century, and he proposed himself to work on a map on the boat of Captain Cook, who was in the Pacific. And they were trying to find several islands. And then in order to find them, they put under his nose a Mercator map with the well-known grid. And Tupaya did not throw away this map, but he completely used this map in a totally other way, because his way of wayfinding was through oral stories of his ancestors. And on top of these stories, how to find your way, there would be the knowledge, the situated knowledge of how the fish would be swimming, how the birds in the sky would be flying, how there would be shadows on the underside of the clouds. So with all this type of situated knowledge, he would just navigate the boat through all these islands for even thousands of kilometers they could find their way. And so he used this Mercator map and put his own knowledge system on top of that and created a counter map at the same time. So we found that a very beautiful image, because it's also possible that one of the real islands could appear on such a map twice, because it's all about a journey and a story. So, and many of the researchers later would think, yeah, that's completely stupid, it doesn't work, it's incomprehensible, but it has its own logic.
Recently, there has been a research in a German university who reconfigured these maps, wrote a 90-page article, and it seems to be quite accurate. He really found those islands, and also you could describe it as song lines, but on waters, basically. So it's basically storytelling, and that's something that we desired from our map. So I already mentioned it's not really a map. It is a map, and it's not a map. So it's disrupting the, let's say, top-down, God's eyes view on the world, which is an instrument of power, of course. It's an instrument of colonization. So that's what we wanted to disrupt, yet at the same time wanted to use this map or reconstruct the world by using shards of this world through storytelling. And the visuals for that came from you guys.
At a certain moment, I remember that we threw away the geolocated map completely, that we said, like, actually a mind map is also a map, and maybe it's not about geolocation at all. But then Max came up with another interesting reference, namely the Piranesi map, and it's a marble plate with the map of Rome that broke down, and Piranesi reconfigured the shards of this plate into new maps, and so there is always fragments of incomplete maps, but they're put differently next to each other, and the distance between the shards create new meanings. So I think the reference is quite clear. But we thought this was really interesting because at a certain moment we had the feeling that our chimney to chimney tour related more to a project of effects in Denmark than to another project in Ghent. That we thought it's strange that if you take the Mercator map as the main representation of our Eavatea, we would be closer to another project in Ghent and never be close to Denmark. So this helped us to look for new connections while affirming the situatedness of our practices.
Yeah, and so then we said, okay, beautiful reference, but how do we do that? How do we make those fragmentary maps? And so there were two questions. Like one was like how to designing the maps that inhabit the shards, and that was I mean, both Sophie and I, we worked together on designing the way the map look inside. Also like using like faded green, yellow tones, I think, going back to those cardboards. That for me, like they make me think of like a library, which I think is somewhere where we have a common space or language, because it's like libraries are a site where you have a huge information system and very organized way of also accessing all the knowledge stored in all the books and resources. Like even before computers and so on. And yeah, I think so. Yeah, that's made like also a bridge between all of us. And then the other part, yes, was the shards, like how to make it. But maybe I will first tell the story and then you can show. So we wanted to make those smaller shapes, but we didn't want to draw them. And then we thought, okay, Piranesi actually had those big stone maps and into pieces because they came from antiquity, so they were broken. So we would need something that was whole someday and then broken into pieces. And at the time, we were also thinking of Clémentine because she was a ceramist. So we thought, okay, maybe we can ask her if one of her pieces could be broken into like small shards. And then we called her and she said, no, but we're not going to waste one of like a ceramic piece. It's so much work to do, but maybe we could make you could make something like sugar. She said biscuits, but it was like, make something that if you break it, it's actually worth it because you can then share it. And so we made a huge plate of sugar shards, like a big casserole, and then laid it down in caramel, laid it down into a big drawer we had in the office. That actually, so you know, the drawer came from National Geographic Institute rescued like drawer thing. So yeah, a real counter mapping. Like it used to have old maps there, and then it had the new maps. And then we invited you guys to break it together with us, and then also we had pancakes, and then we scanned each bit. Yeah, and then we had the shards. But it also means that there is a limited amount of shards, and once all of them are used, we have to make sugar again.
Another collective practice.
Exactly.
Which is not a side note, by the way. I think it's important. We said a lot that we don't want to make a digital platform. We actually want to create an organization or a way of working together, and the digital platform is it's just a digital reality of a physical reality. And this we wanted to create also ways of organizing ourselves, and this was like a first ritual start. And we decided that, okay, once they're all chosen, we come together again and we do this again. So the idea has been all the time, or we continue this thinking, like, what can happen in real life?
Yeah, I think we can say it's a agora, a second agora, parallel to our physical meetings that we have, and that we try to activate live for ourselves to upload together and to discuss, but also for the public. And now that's the first time that we do this. So yeah, we really wanted that we all have to be in a Zoom meeting, but that it really creates physical meetings as well. And that's what we find important in our practices too, that it's not just a walk in the computer or something like that, but that it creates an agora, like a meeting place where you can share your values together.
And maybe this is also true for on the level of our own practices and how we imagine that we could, from now on and in the near future, use this platform. Because of course it's a digital interface. You could say that you build a digital interface and then it's up to the digital community to simply use it or discover what is there. But one of the things that is under development and that we're also continuously thinking about is how you can perform these digital infrastructures and how, as an artist, you can mobilize what you built in a certain way to kind of activate your archive in another way than you can in a physical format. We have no good answers yet, but it's something that is continuously turning our heads around, this kind of relationship between the material world and experiences that happen in certain situations and that we value in our practices. And then this archive, which is a digital tool, but that helps maybe in a later phase to kind of activate that archive in another way, and as such perform this platform.
Well, in a way, there's a possibility maybe to, if we think what we did, for instance, with walking through Cooperative City Ghent, we did a real walk, but when uploading our documents, we could actually perform that walk in front of you guys using the tool as a apparatus that would allow us to show actual physical digital documents in an archive, which of course would be hard to show when you're walking in real space. So in real space in the city, you would reference maybe a public sculpture or something else, a certain situation or a building, whereas what we would do when we would perform this walk in front of a live audience, we could actually go into documents and historical material that's not available when you're out on the street. What is also important is, and it's an exercise that we also did, and maybe if you remember the charts that we show on the summer school this year, it's still a bit feeble, right? There were only 9 charts for 3 days of working. But of course, there's a reason for that. We had imagined to co-curate these things together, which means how can we decide what to upload and how to connect things? Because the summer school for us is also always a kind of wide program. There's different aspects that relate very closely or indirectly, like you just saw images of the garden. What has this to do with our tool? Of course, there's many references to be made, but it's more like indirect. Hello, Kalan. The thing is, of course, we need to learn to discuss this and to understand how we can come to decisions collectively. And maybe that is something, Loes, you will also have to, because your perspective in the use of the tool is more curatorial.
I think indeed, as a representative of an organization that also has other members, there was really a journey throughout this process of making the tool. And I really had to rethink the role that we take on in the platform. And that was a really interesting one. It started from, okay, we organize walks, we can put that on the tool, and then each point where something is shown is an artist, we can put that on the tool. But of course, immediately became clear, yeah, but who is the author, who is the user? And then came the notion of, we as an organization are the maker. So we take on another role than we usually take on. Normally we support artists, but here we are the map makers as well. So we have to curate our content and also dive into what our role is as organization, as programmers, as artists, as producers. So that was an interesting journey and also a very good one, because then you start figuring out what you want to make visible on the platform, and you want to make visible work that usually is not so visible for the audience. So there is one example that we want to put on the platform. That's the project called Kunst en Zwalm that we co-curated together with Manoeuvre here in Ghent. And it's basically, it's a trajectory, a walk in the countryside of East Flanders, where also Vermeir Heiremans were invited. And so we had 16 artists making work in the landscape. And if you then connect this to this tool and want to put our work in that, it's not necessarily all the points where the artists are presenting something that we should put on, but maybe the monthly walks that we did beforehand. That was our work. That's how we invited the artists to work, and that's where we came together. So there was a big shift in thinking, rethinking our role with this tool, and a very good one, empowering one, but also to see together with a group of makers around the table. And then, there's well, and then there's the question of performing the tool, but for me there's also a big question of maintenance of the tool and how we can, as an organization, support that again, how we can support this community that is growing around. So that is,
It has, we didn't say the word yet, but it has an archival function. So it's about archiving something, but archive is a heavy word because it seems to lock things up, while the way we, as having artistic research practices, we want to keep material dynamic, and that's how the tool is designed, and why it's also so messy. I think it's not the purpose that you find your way easily in. That's maybe the job of a performance or an activation then, but it's more about getting lost in a lot of interesting material that is not necessarily produced by us, but that is found by us and linked to each other. So the job we do is linking things.
Yeah, I think that was also what we came up with, that indeed the archive as a fixed idea is a bit boring. So how can it become relational? Like, how do you link the practices or the documents together? How can you go in the tool and create a journey for yourself? It's like an adventure tour that you just try to find out and make associations between things. And also, again, it reminds me of Tupaya, because you also have these chants that they sing with the ancestors, but they're also not like sentences or stories that are completely fixed. They have like a core idea around which there are always variations according to who is singing it, in which time it is sung, and also what the navigator is finding on his way, because maybe something has shifted from the course, or maybe there is a storm coming, and then all the stories and the archive, so to speak, it has to be dynamic, or you can't find your way back. So yeah, that's also kind of reference that we had to link things together.
Can I ask a question?
Sure.
Yes, please.
Maybe I missed it, but when you're in a gesture and you clicked on a certain fragment, there are these related fragments. How are, like, who decides the relation? Is it the tool itself, or did you do that manually?
No, that's what we just called co-curating.
Yeah.
So that's why it's only a couple of fragments that we uploaded. We're totally not finished. We totally underestimated, of course, as usual. The thing is, when you start accumulating material, it very soon becomes a mountain. And then you start organizing the mountain, cutting it up in different pieces, trying to put a name on it, and trying to explain when it's something that you brought to the table, try to explain to your colleagues, why do you think it is important? And your colleagues will probably say, well, you're mistaken there. It's not important. Or it is important. So that's the discussion. Once we have a group of different heaps of material, then we try to understand, okay, but why is this next to this one? And why isn't it there? What is the link actually between these different series of documents or quotes? And that's how you can go really far in interconnecting all of these details. It's like knitting, basically, but only we still learn to knit, so it's a messy pullover. And there's still a lot of, let's say, things to figure out. And I think that's the wrong picture. We're not lazy at all. Is the other one. So this one is about geestesarbeiders, who had to become part of the labor movement of the socialists. I think that's about conceptual artists, although at the time it might not have existed yet. So these are really things that we find, discover, that have been hidden in archives, or it could be any other little detail that you come across during your research or practice or walk. And the nice thing about this agora is that you can talk to each other about it, and that, and foremost, is what the aim of the tool is, to learn from each other, exchange, and find interesting narratives together. And then the funny thing is that when I or we or you are invited by an art institution to perform something or to do something, well, you can make a new trajectory. You can start linking other things to each other and just tell a story. So in a sense, it becomes a new medium, a new device for either research or performance. I think that is something of a goal that we want to reach. It is there in its, let's say, embryonic form, and I'm sure that we still have a long way to go, but we still are confident that we are kind of moving forward and not in a standstill phase at this point.
out of achter.
Het is vooruit.
Hoeveel context geef je mee als je zoiets laat zien? How much context do you need to really know what these things are about? That's, I think, quite important.
So in this particular detail, there is no description yet. So there is obviously, this is the description that we invented in 1 minute. So it's not a description, right? So it has a proper description. It has a reference where it comes from. It has the context in which we used it. So that's basically it. Also, the people who worked on it contributed it. So that's basically the identification of the object. But of course, this object is many things at the same time. And that's if you link it to other objects, its meaning starts to change because the meaning of the thing actually is co-defined by the other things around it. And that's how you come to all these shards as an idea. That's what we assume.
And one of the discussions that we're actually now having quite a lot is this the question on how a visual organization of contents creates a narrative and how it actually gives context by creating proximities. At the moment, you see that these shards are organized according to a grid, which is something that the internet and the digital interface really likes, but that maybe and needs, but that maybe for us in our artistic practices is not the most or the sufficient way to kind of create this context and create proximities and start to kind of create narratives in a visual way. So we're discussing a lot on how to do that. Is that a visual question? Is that a textual question? And what does the visual side of this interface provide us with as possibilities? And where do we need to add context through text? Because for us, this is also an artistic question on where do we put our efforts and how do we proceed in the development of this platform as an artistic tool and not as a purely informational interface. Again.
But then also our needs or what we want to show, we continuously have to go in dialogue with the mappers and with the coding. So it's really, I think, it's finding out ways how we can make the context, for example. So then, okay, there is this, which is the situation, gives a bit of context. There's description. There is a practice that contextualizes different gestures. But this is all to be found on the way, and then finding visual ways to bring more context or relations. Or that's the work and that's the journey.
That's why we use the word archipelago.
Yeah, and the question is also like, how can we get rid of the grid? Like in the first page with the beaches around it, it's a bit disturbed, this grid-like view, but here it's like a neatly ordered page of maybe an archaeologist putting shards on a plate to do his research. And so we were thinking, is it also possible not to create search words or hashtags, but even use a small poem to do it, or a small story? And would that create then poetic links between objects or documents and so on? Or maybe it's possible to create clusters at all the islands that have a certain theme that you want to look into, just move closer to each other. So how can this visually be done, and that we can get rid of that grid-like structure?
Well, I wouldn't say get rid. I would say, like you said about Tupaya. Tupaya never threw away the Mercator map. We will not throw away the grid, but we want to enrich the grid with a certain form of chaos that is, or imagination, which is a necessary ingredient if you want to use a grid as a storytelling device. Otherwise, you jump from that. That's not really. Well, we have a goal that goes beyond the grid. Let's put it like that.
Maybe we can go back to the discussions we had on Monday and Tuesday, because the whole week was around the cooperative model. And that's the backside of this tool, like how to govern it. It's a big question. I don't know if I can formulate it well. But we, for instance, have this question like, what if a big art institution, like for instance, Canal, wants to join? Under what form? Yeah, I should make it very tangible.
You mean like Kunsthal?
Yeah, under what form, or what would it mean? And then the cooperative model actually gives some inspiration.
Well, yeah, there's many questions in terms of governance, of course. Who has access to the tool? You know, are we scaling up the number of people that use it? At this point, we're about, let's say, 10 max. Yeah, there's many questions related to that. And since this is a co-authored piece, so it's not one author, we consider the piece as a knowledge commons, you could say. And interesting about the knowledge commons is that in contrast to a natural commons, which is limited in its use, if you have a meadow or a water source, there's only that many people that can use it before it stops being useful. A digital commons has the opposite characteristics. As the more people that use it, the better actually. But then you have a problem of scaling. So we thought rather than enlarging a big group of people or having a big group of people access to this tool, we could imagine small communities, small groups of people using the same tool. And since the digital tool is requires funding to maintain and to update and to debug and all of these things, we also need resources, and resources are for these types of practices not easy to come by. So we thought also in the sense that we don't really see an art market very interested in this, and we probably are a bit dependent at this point on cultural policy, which is dependent on the political majority of the moment or the preferences of committees. So you're not really in charge, basically, of the plans you want to develop. And maybe a cooperative model could be maybe a solution is a wrong word, because it would never be, it would basically be a miniature model to cover expenses, basically. And if all these people that join the tool, these communities would, let's say, chip in something in the cooperative, then we would have a little yearly budget to cover expenses. But that is very projected.
Yeah, but I think it was interesting to talk about vooruit breadth and the breadth distribution. So what happens at this moment is that as an artist, you actually sell breadths, like performances, you do, but you have an ongoing practice. And what if an institution supports the cooperative and buys a share in here, then it can support a practice and have a reduction on the breads you sell. So I thought it was quite interesting to think also in a different economic model.
And maybe next to an economic model, also another form of institutional support for other types of practices that are less project orientated and that are maybe interested in longer term and practice-based engagements with
Collective.
and yes, collective dynamics that are not so easy to kind of incorporate in current institutional models, and is a kind of, there is a tension there. So we also see this tool maybe as an experiment to kind of see how we could reshape that relationship by, well, in the first step, including Nadine, but also thinking about partnering up with other institutional partners and thinking what that means to include them in this relational infrastructure and kind of reconfiguring how we could work together on something instead of being invited to kind of perform and make bread in an artistic sense.
Yeah. Tomorrow we will also have a talk to another example of a digital commons. So that might be also interested to put the two examples next to each other, but we've also been thinking like how can it become a bit more sustainable? So maybe the institutions or people wanting to participate, there is a kind of license possible, a kind of fair license, because for us it's also important that when this is a collective endeavor, that you don't just use the usual IP rights and so on, but that this, and neither that you just give away everything for free, but in the digital commons examples, what they do is like creating like fair licenses so that like similar organizations or artists can use the IP or can use the open source, but like for-profit entities cannot do it. So you can also share what you have and maybe have a bit of income from it, but yeah, that it's at the same time protected, but not in this individualistic way that normal IP rights are set up.
Yeah, I guess
Maybe you can say something about the sources that you use, open source tools.
Yeah, I mean, because for now, yeah. So the code is open source, and so you can access it and use it and have your own Eavatea. But then, apart from that, I think it would be really nice because I mean we are a small team working on it, and so Pierre is mostly working on the development of the tool, and then Sophie has been like leading mostly on the also like design and aesthetics of it. And I'm in the middle, like we're always two in front of a computer, so I'm either next to Pierre or next to Sophie, and yeah. And it would be nice to get more developers or designers also interested into it and see what that could bring up, because also you were mentioning maintenance, Loes, and so there is the maintenance of the content, like on the curatorial side, but also it's a software and it also needs maintenance because internet, it changes fast, and then you just need to update things constantly, and it's work. But it would be, I think, also nice if we think of it as a digital commons, to have like more people around the table talking about what they would want and their desires, but also bring people to the table that can also contribute to writing the code. I don't know, maybe it could be nice.
Yeah, I think these are questions that are still very much abstract, let's say, theoretical, because the next year we will focus on making it operational, and while doing that, during this year, upcoming year, we already have some chapters that would link it to a next phase. So many thanks, Kunsthal, for hosting us to experiment and look into questions from commons to pop, let's say, but we'll be back for another week, and then we will focus on legal questions, IP questions, authorship questions, which are also very important. And we also partner with MUCA and CKV. CKV is the Center for Artist Archives in Flanders. And at that point, we will discuss also forms of federating, so finding matching groups of people with similar interests and trying to come up with if we have all these ingredients together, come up with some form of a model that sets out a series of rules and methods of use and how to govern this thing as open as possible. But of course, it is impossible to see it as a thing that has a free access for all, just like that. It would very soon turn into a chaos. So the multiplication of the tool is something that is on the level of small scales at this point, at least in my imagination.
With archipelagos of different federations. Yeah. That's a bit the idea we have in our mind now.
Maybe we did enough talking, and I'm sure you had lots of information coming towards you, so we'd be happy to address any of your questions or try to explain a bit more if you have questions. please shoot. We're here to.
Yeah, maybe one question about the use of the tool. So back to the first part. If you say you want to a max to max, maybe you would like to use it for performance. Should I imagine that you sort of create a narrative on the basis of the fragments, and you also sort of take input from neighboring shards, or would it be a tool to sort of perform your own project or gesture? I have to say, I'm really trying to wrap my head around the word gesture. It just doesn't really land with me, because in a way it's all projects. So I guess we're also project formatted in our head, that it's kind of difficult to move over to seeing this as a gesture, but I guess you would try to open it up to make it relate to other things, right?
Yes. I think as this platform is an attempt to kind of valorize the collaborations that most of us in the artistic field are having, but that are very rarely put at the forefront. In a sense, performing this platform is also a way of performing those collaborations, or figuring out ways in which these collaborations become tangible in a performative way. It would, I think, make very little sense to return to the kind of artist-author to kind of make an individual gesture. In what form? I do not have an answer, but I think it's an interesting thought experiment, and also an artistic challenge to kind of work with that material and think about the relationships that we have amongst us through the things that we deal with, the themes that we are interested in, and the places that we engage ourselves in. So I think it would make a lot of sense to kind of attempt things in that direction.
And is this then the first attempt into such a performance? Or
I think so. I think that like over the course of this trajectory up until now, I think next to having a lot of meetings and kind of figuring out protocols and ways of coming together, doing things together, and finding ways of relating these physical acts with this digital platform, writing an article together, which is also not an evident thing for an academic journal, a co-authored article. And for us was also an experiment in how do we collectively talk about what we're doing.
How do you do it? Writing together. How did you do it?
That's a secret.
No, I think if you read it, it becomes quite apparent. We kind of explicitly talked about the methodology, but it's a semi-fictional group conversation that we have amongst ourselves about reasons why we participated in this, and the kind of discussions that were going on in our meetings, but then in a kind of semi-fictional way to be able to reflect about it at the same time.
We have the bad habit of taking very detailed notes of our meetings. So it's a lot of work, but that's basically the source material. And then you turn into a version that people can read. And as Max said, it became a fictional dialogue between all the voices, and related these, we grouped, as we did with visual material, we regrouped these voices thematically. So how about agency? In what sense does this thing give us agency? Or what does it mean, agency? How is this a dark infrastructure? Does this relate to the code, or does this relate to the mapping tool as such? A relational object, in what sense does that play? Questions of governance. So all of these themes are there in that article, and then you have all these quotes from our meetings that are put in front of each other, so you become actually a conversation. So a really interesting form actually that came about by testing out.
But I think it's a good question. It's mainly ambition we formulate, that we want it to be activated as well, so that it's not merely an archive. But I think this year we have to experiment with it. It's a tool that is different from a PowerPoint presentation, that is different from a Google Maps.
I think there's still a lot of effort for us to become fluent in using this tool because it's still
and developing it further.
And I think from the beginning, there was the ambition that the tool itself could become an agent as well, like almost a persona in this whole story, and maybe that's the next phase when an audience starts going into that. What does that mean? What story is told through what we put on there? But yeah, it's another level.
No, but in that way, it's also like the act of map making is a practice, opposed to a map, which is an artifact. And the fact that we're continuously talking about something that is in process or under development is also a way of using the idea of map making as a way of continuing practice and also continuing to develop ideas about what we value and how this relates to this digital interface that we're working on. So it's this developing of ideas, but at the same time working on like digital physical things.
And I think that the title also says it all: lost and found and lost again. So you can also feel like we were having trouble, like, okay, what does it mean? What can it do? But yeah, it's also very vulnerable to show people into the kitchen when there is still a mess of pots and pans and you're still cooking. But yeah, that's what it is. So yeah, you're just part of this process right now.
Can I ask, I came in a little bit late, so maybe you mentioned it, but did you speak about the notion of counter mapping?
Yes,
we did.
Because the practice of map making as a longer thing and then deciding over the course of, in this case, more than 2 years already and ongoing, thinking of what is valuable to put in there, it has a lot to do with what we want to show and what are things that are maybe repressed by history or actually the present, potentially the future. And I think it's a really wonderful tool and dynamic artifact, if you want to call it that supports a process of thinking how we can visualize and make relational different things that are maybe undervalued.
I'm wondering, it seems like about something, it seems like now all the connection between fragments and all the inputs you want to have in this mapping tool, it's you that need to bring it, to create the connection with putting. So I'm wondering if this kind of tool is not also a possibility to have something beyond our understanding, something much more random, that will do this kind of connection and create some possibility of narrative by itself.
Yeah, we talked about this. I guess before just having, let's say, random association made by the tool, I mean that we would then just program it so that it associates things randomly. We thought it would be more interesting to actually dive in what kind of relations already exist or can already be shown, and like go to the end of that first, because also there are already a lot of different types of relations existing, and I think Max mentioned it also about the how it's not so often that you show the collaborations between the people and so on, and also when Ciel said that the digital side of the platform is linked to existing relations and connections. And so it would be strange to have, well, at least that's my point of view now, but it would be strange to have just random associations there. And then if they are there, we should then see what they provoke amongst us here.
But that was a question in the beginning, huh? you also have to make a choice, if I remember well, between this kind of arbitrary associations like algorithms that do it for you, or you organize it yourself by hand. So it cannot have the two at the same time, apparently, in the codes. But yeah, we think we find it more interesting to try to work with the grid and organize the connections in another way, and that we can also find new ways to organize it. Like I said before, maybe we can introduce a poem or a small story to create these clusters of meaning or connections. And when someone that doesn't know us enter the tool and goes through a journey, maybe there is a way to keep that journey, to save it, and then in the end, print it in a PDF or whatever. So then there is another connection made that maybe we didn't see.
I think the other way around, it's what's already happening on social media, on Google. There is already so much links made for you based on parameters like tracing the text, keywords, geographical, and actually we want to show other kinds of or original links that are not numeric. Yeah.
Algorithmic.
Yeah,
But-
algorithmic.
But even if we do, what you say is still possible. So the material is there. If somebody has the courage and the time and the energy to wander around and make his own connection, well, he can or she can. There's no.
Also, when I said randomly, it's not just also in sense of not having, but like you say, it's something that exists already, but to have a tool that facilitates the input and to bring some narrative that you cannot imagine just because you have an AI that will go through the audio file and keep some keywords and put them together with some other. And so,
But then the AI does the fun job of making associations. So I guess, yeah.
But there are still many possibilities we haven't even started to explore. Into what you just said with poetry, I always keep thinking of certain forms of poetry or William Burroughs cut-up technique or stuff like that if we just put in literal keywords, that might be a bit boring, but we could challenge each other and say, well, you put in a word. It doesn't need to be a keyword, just a word. And when you start collecting different charts together and each chart represents a word, you have a phrase, but it's a nonsensical phrase. But there's so many coincidental possibilities there that are, I think, interesting to figure out. Does it work? Does it not work? I think there's too much,
But we can find our own algorithms.
go beyond the grid, but also go beyond your proper intentionality to explore possibilities of visual storytelling, but also words are just words. They go way beyond their literal meaning. So I think that is out there for us to explore. That's why we also considered it an artistic medium, to really work with it as artist form of expression and experiment that, well, so far we're kind of challenging, let's say.
But I mean, like on a practical level too, though, it is also, how would you say, quite helpful in terms of making new associations. Also thinking to maybe to what you were saying about the performativity of it, or what is the performativity. We were sort of collectively doing a pedagogical performative exercise the whole week with bringing in, if we went back to the initial page of the digital version of what we showed, connecting it to the analog of all of the different mapping of the different associations and contributors, bringing in objects, images, even costumes that we have kind of displayed up on the second floor that we've been kind of working with. For me, this is also, how would you say, like it does have a really practical research dimension, where in this exercise, we were starting to, or at least I was realizing, okay, the project that I've been working on fermented wild ales in the art sector is I can find linkages to the seed bank and to collective bakeries in the built environment of gens that I would have no idea if existed. So I mean, there is. I'm also speaking from my perspective, having taken part in those, but there is also like a very, I think, huge potential in the infrastructure to facilitate artistic research and learning and knowledge. On going back to what you had said, Max, about maybe as a self-organized or a tool that facilitates or let's just say works to create an infrastructure for artists that doesn't already exist within institutional frameworks. So for me, I think it's super fascinating in those ways. But yeah, again, so many possibilities. So more of a comment, but
one for the road, and then we stop. Cool. That's it. Thank you very much. Oh, sorry. Ja, dat ben ik vergeten.